I've just put a C-clamp on the back, and I'll use the same trigger gauge to see how much force it actually takes to work the slide on an easy slide. Hello everyone, and welcome back to AmmoMart.com, where you can find real firepower online. As we all know, in the past few years, millions of new gun owners have purchased handguns. And we also know that a large percentage of those are older first-time gun buyers. One of the challenges that you have as an instructor, or if you're in retail, is trying to figure out whether your customer or your student has enough manual dexterity in their hands and fingers to actually run the gun they purchased. I set my mind to trying to solve this problem, and what I came up with was a fairly unscientific test, but I think you're going to appreciate how it might translate into some real-world value. So what I have in front of me is a gallon of milk. That's going to become a very important prop because it weighs about 8 pounds. A gallon of water, of course, would as well if you want to try this demonstration at home. And I've assembled some various pistols, and you'll notice I put a clamp on one of them. And what I'm going to attempt to do is unscientifically demonstrate how much strength you actually have to work the slide on a semi-automatic pistol. And I think some of our viewers are going to be shocked about how much it actually takes. So for the first part of the demonstration, what I'm going to do is stand up, and what I have here is a trigger gauge puller from RCBS. Now, this gauge only goes up to about 8 pounds or so, but you can see the little meter will go past the 8-pound mark. Now, once again, it's not scientific. It's more of an illustration on some things that your customers need to know before they buy a semi-automatic pistol. So, what I'd like to do first is gauge how much strength or force you would need to pick up this gallon of milk. And then I'll try to catch on camera what the gauge actually says. So hopefully we'll be able to catch, as I lift the jug off the table, how much energy or force that actually takes. And then I'll try to sit really still so it doesn't bounce. And there it's off the table. And it takes more than 8 pounds. So some of you might be thinking at home, okay, gallon of milk, not too difficult. However, as I mentioned, a lot of our new potential gun buyers can't do that. And if they can't, that's an important thing to identify before they make the purchase and waste northwards of $400 and potentially a lot more. So, okay, I think most of us get the fact that that's 8 pounds. What I have now, let's move on to how much force does it actually take to work the slide. I have two very popular models of firearms on the market from Smith & Wesson. One is the EZ Slide 380 and the other is the EZ Slide 9mm. These guns were designed specifically for people with strength and dexterity issues in their hands. So once again, not very scientific, but all I have, the gun was clear, of course. I had a chamber flag in it. I've just put a C-clamp on the back, and I'll use the same trigger gauge to see how much force it actually takes to work the slide on an easy slide. The magazine is inserted and will be inserted for all 3 demonstrations. So I'm just going to tug backwards and you'll see the slide moving. And hopefully we're catching on the other camera how much force that takes. And it would appear like that it was fairly similar to the gallon of milk. I can't verify that until I watch the video, but I'm going to release the slide and do it again. Okay, here we go. Pull this guy to the rear. And the last little bit. It caught right at or maybe slightly beyond the 8-pound mark. So here we go again. The interest of scientific research, the more we do it, the better it'll be. Clicked right at 8 pounds. All 3 times. So believe it or not, of course, once again, this is all very unscientific. but it requires just about as much force to work the slide on an easy slide as it does to pick up that gallon of milk. So if you can't do that with a couple of fingers required to work the slide, even the easy slide may not be the firearm for you, or potentially semi-automatics in general. Now let's move on to a larger caliber version of the same gun. This would be the Smith & Wesson 9mm easy slide, and test how much force that requires. Here we go. Give this guy a tug. Slide's finally coming with. There it clicked. Try this again. Now you'll notice how long the gauge is buried, and then how long it takes to actually get the slide to go beyond the magazine. I would be comfortable saying that it requires, if for that last little bit to lock the magazine, at least 4 to 5 pounds more pressure than the 380. It might be that you can find this information out off of Smith & Wesson's website or some other exact specifications of the firearm, but there is no doubt that it requires more force to work the slide on the 9mm version of the EZ than the 380. Now, what I'd like to do is move on to a non-EZ designed gun, in that what you would typically find in the firearm industry, with heavy recoil springs in order to keep the recoil impulse dampened as much as possible. For the next demonstration, I've selected the BRG 9 Elite. This I find to be an extremely soft shooting gun, and it doesn't have anything special related to its recoil springs. They're all doubled up, they work very well, and it is a very common design that you would find in the firearm industry. Let's see how much force it would take to run a slide of that design. Okay. Once again, the magazines were in all models, as is it on this one. Significantly tougher. This is the second run of the BRG using the trigger gauge, and you almost don't have enough energy to do it this way. Requires a lot of force. I would say triple hard. So imagine that we would be comfortable saying that it requires 20 to 24 pounds of force to run this slide. A common way to look at it is, whether it's a Glock or CZ, your stock semi-automatic springs are typically rated somewhere between 15 to 17 pounds. People do buy aftermarket recoil springs and lighten them up to increase the slide speed, but in general, they're going to be somewhere between 15 and 17 pounds. When you add in the friction of the slide, you get a little bit more energy required, and this certainly bears out in this demonstration. So in conclusion, if your significant other or your customer or your students are having trouble running a semi-automatic handgun, by all means, use the 1 gallon analogy of water or milk. That 8 pounds is the minimum that they're going to have to be able to do to effectively run a semi-automatic handgun, provided they actually choose the right one to begin with. What I would like to impress upon our viewers as we conclude this week's video is basically this. There are makes and models of firearms on the market that are suitable for people with strength and dexterity issues in their hands to a certain point. However, handing somebody a model like the EZ slide and following the assumption that it's going to work because it's designed for that, that may not be the case depending on your individual customer or student. The only way to tell is to have them actually manipulate the gun smoothly. And along with that, I would like to throw in one more sort of technique that you can use to maximize what strength and dexterity you do have in your hands. A lot of times, new shooters mimic what they've seen on television, or perhaps mimic what they see the person on the other side of the counter do, and that's usually a person with a lot of firearms experience and is plenty strong enough to grab the gun, take a couple of fingers at the rear of the slide, grab the notches, and just give it a pull. Looks easy. However, that technique will absolutely not work for a vast array of your customers. A lot of the things I commonly see, as I mentioned, is somebody will take a couple of fingers and do a pinch action back here. And in reality, what it would look like is this. They take a straight right arm, slightly bent perhaps, pinch it back here and try to give it a pull. Well, the issue with all of that is, once again, they're probably not going to have the power to do that. So here is a potential hack or a technique they can try to see if they can overcome the friction of the slide. First thing we'd like to do, obviously keep the muzzle in a safe direction, is put the firearm across your chest like this, somewhat close, perhaps 3 to 4 inches away. And then using the entire left hand, we want to grab the entire top slide, not pinch it with 2 fingers, so we can get our whole hand on the top slide. And you'll notice one of the things they'll try to do is grab the whole gun, because sometimes they don't even really realize that the slide moves, believe that or not. So if we have them grab the gun with a little bit of space here, and so they're not having their hand collapsed on top of the slide, now we can put the gun across our chest and lift our elbows. And the next thing we're going to do is try to drive our hands together. So it's push-pull, however you want to call it. But we want to lift up the elbows and simply drive them together. That short jab action does help people oftentimes overcome the friction in the slide. So I'm going to remove the chamber flag, close the slide, and once again, we're going to lift and drive with some explosive energy, and I think a lot of the time that will help people actually work the controls on the gun. So buyer beware. Just because it's easy, it may not be. And keep in mind, if your customer has a hard time holding on to things as what some people consider light as a jug of milk, it's probably time to reconsider another option.